form of cash, and then you get to the war on cash, which I was one of the first people to write about, although I didn't call it the war on cash. I called it Operation Dirty Money.
Operation Dirty Money.
It's a very unsuccessful program. It won't work. And you can't have Las Vegas if you don't have cash. I mean, people want cash.
Welcome to Rethinking the Dollar. Today I'm excited to have my guest, Mr. Kerry Lutz. He's the founder of the Financial Survivor Network, and today he's joining us to discuss the global economy, as well as to share his thoughts on the future of the dollar. Mr. Lutz is not only the founder of the Financial Survivor Network, but he's also the radio host of his show that focuses on helping people prosper and thrive in the new economy. He has interviewed hundreds of top-mind financial world experts and has a passion for helping people and to help preserve and protect their wealth. So, Kerry, welcome to Rethinking the Dollar.
Hey, well, thank you so much for having me on. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be on your show.
Well, I appreciate you taking time to sit down with me. I've followed your work for quite some time now, and definitely it's been very important in my educational process. So I've used it as an educational tool, I'm sure as well as many others. But today I want to get into some dollar details. I know there's a lot of things happening globally, and I'm interested in getting your take based upon your experience as a host and having interviewed a lot of gentlemen in regards to this matter here. And so before we get into that, I'd like to have some RTD questions answered. And the first one, what comes to mind when Kerry Lutz hears the words rethinking the dollar?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting term, and I like it. I think it's a great name for a show. So rethinking the dollar, it's got different levels to it. On the one hand, it's you as a consumer, as an entrepreneur, as an employee, you're paid in dollars, you save in dollars, so you have a relationship to the United States currency. It's the reserve currency of the world as well, and you're probably unconscious of your relationship here. You have a dependency upon that dollar being stable, being a unit of value, having value, and you just make certain assumptions about it. So when I hear that rethinking the dollar, you need to rethink your relationship and the underlying assumptions you have about that currency unit and where it's going to be in the future, your future relationship with it. Is it going to be the same? And you need to look back in time and what has the dollar done in the past? And is the past going to be prologue? So that's what I think of there. And the rest of the world has a relationship with the dollar and a certain confidence level in the dollar. And what's that going to be going ahead? So I kind of went into your second question there, but that's what I think of when I think of rethinking the dollar.
Right, understandable. Now, my goal here is to target the millennial generation, those who grew up not really knowing or having any type of awareness of the monetary history of this nation, period. So there's a lot of things relevant to them that they had known nothing about. So in your opinion, why is the idea of monetary awareness or monetary literacy important, and more so important now in this day and age than ever before?
Well, and it's not just the millennials that grew up without knowing monetary history. It's also the baby boomers for the most part, and Gen X as well. And I believe this is deliberate. There's not much in the history books that really explain the evolution of the dollar. When the country was founded, basically there was the dollar was pretty much defined as a certain measurement of silver, okay, weight of silver. And throughout time, there was no central bank yet. We had the Bank of the United States initially, which was formed at the behest of our first Treasury Secretary, Alexander Hamilton, in an effort to pay off the debt of the Revolutionary War. Then there was the Second Bank of the United States, and then President Jackson killed that. There's a whole history involved there. Then for much of the United States' history, from Jackson through to 1913, we had no central bank, and the dollar was printed by the Treasury. There was no Federal Reserve until 1913 when it was passed in the dead of night on Christmas, 1913. We didn't have one. And, there was basically very little inflation in the United States, inflation being defined in this instance as a loss of purchasing power in the dollar, meaning you go to McDonald's, you buy a Big Mac for $1 well, they didn't have McDonald's back then, but I'm giving a bad example here. But
No, I understand.
assume there was a McDonald's in uh, in 1776, and you could buy a Big Mac for $1 then, and then come 1912, you could buy a Big Mac for roughly $1.15. All right, your money bought almost the same amount. The inflation rate was 0.12% from 1776 through 1912. All right, because the money supply didn't change, you couldn't just print up gold. Uh, the dollar was basically backed by gold or silver. I don't want to get into the whole history of that. It's a little confusing and it's not necessary for the discussion. Point being, there were wars and there were times where the dollar did lose value, but that was when the dollar inflation occurred due to wars when paper money was issued. Other than that, there was no inflation. We had a very stable currency, and that, to a large extent, was why the United States became a very prosperous and wealthy country. There are other reasons as well. We don't need to get into them. But a stable currency, property rights, rule of law, little things like those are why the U.S. prospered. So I'm kind of getting off the topic here, but monetary history, it's never taught in schools anymore. You might find some colleges teaching it that teach Austrian economics, but it is so important that all of you out there understand the monetary history of the United States. It is, I can't underscore it enough, Mike. It is so, so important to understanding why this country prospered and why all citizens prospered. Yeah, there were robber barons, there were very wealthy people, but the average American prospered along with those people as well. And the country did extremely well up until, well,
Right.
it really prospered.
I
So,
understand completely, and so that's my goal is to reach, to give people a different perspective of, how the standard of living was high and the cost of living was low, and the country was doing well. And things have changed drastically in the last, 50 or last 100+ years since we got into the central banking model again. And now the
mhm.
inflation, there's an inflation target now of 2%, which is automatically robbing people of 2% off top before you get taxed on all. So just more information. So definitely get into that a little bit more now. If Kerry Lutz was given a chance to give the global state of the economy address, like you factor in all the central banking problems, banking sector problems, debt, things like that, what would you tell the world at your radio show right now if you were, all eyes were tuned into your channel right now?
Yeah, well, I'd say that the state of the global economy is very dire. Uh, it's very weak. We have negative growth in many parts of the world. Where we do have growth, even the United States, last quarter, if you believe the numbers, U.S. growth was at an anemic 1.2%, which isn't enough to put these kids getting out of college to work. And those numbers could be inflated as well. I mean, you go to college and you graduate. Is that to become a waiter or a bartender? Not that
Right.
there's anything wrong with those jobs, but you don't really need a college education
Right.
to undertake them. And then you look at Europe, you look at Asia. We have a system that's no longer serving the greater good. The monetary system, the dollar, uh, it appears its days are numbered, although it's kind of like a light bulb, an old incandescent light bulb, often shine brighter right before it burned out,
Right.
shine brightest. Um, we see structural unemployment, and then we've got automation, which really will increase that. So we've got to reevaluate this whole system and figure out what what employment means, um, what what is where we're heading here as a race of people.
Right.
These wars uh, seem to be calculated to make a certain portion of society wealthy, and then we've got a global elite that turns us against each other on various issues, whether it's race, whether it's economics, whether it's country to country, uh, political parties. These political parties are the most destructive thing ever created in America, and that's by design.
Yeah.
If I can identify you as a certain member of a certain party, then I can immediately put you into a box and decide I don't like you, not knowing anything else about you.
Right.
All right. These parties, and it's all over the world, we have these parties. So then we've created certain situations in certain countries uh, that will inevitably lead to war. So the state of global economy really dire right now,
Right.
and could lead to global depression at any moment.
Right.
So we
Wow.
need to be looking for solutions rather than looking for people to blame,
Right.
and rather than looking uh, for causes. I'm just always think of Einstein, brilliant guy, uh, by no means the most brilliant who ever walked the planet, but he always said, you can't solve a problem with the same level of thinking that created the problem. You've
Right.
got to rise to a higher level. And in my own life, I found that to be exceptionally the case, and in others. And as a planet, got to go to a higher level of thinking. And we're not doing it as a race, as a planet. And I don't mean to get all new agey with you, because that's not my thing. I think this new age stuff is a bunch of crap for the most part.
Yeah.
Kumbaya and all that. I mean, I don't think we should be killing each other. Don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but you know, uh, getting to a higher level of thought uh, can be done and is done by many people on the planet, but not enough, and certainly not our leaders. Uh, we have a crisis of leadership on the planet, um, in virtually every country, and uh, and the old model of economics is not working, and free market economics over time, over the centuries, has proven to be the most effective means of transferring wealth to the largest number of people, which is perhaps why the powers that be fight it at every given turn, and have done their best to suppress it
Yeah.
to its present day.
Wow. Yeah, that's very true. Now, let's you're already a show host, and so, you've spoken to hundreds of gentlemen that, live in the monetary and financial world. What has been some of the common themes or common topics of discussion that's been on the forefront of the majority? If you were to try to, come up with an average conversation topic, what's one or two of the things that's really on people's minds and pretty much their focus?
That's a really good question. You really got some good questions here.
Thanks, sir.
And the corrupt system, the corruption of the current governments around the world, just breathtaking. Uh, I never thought I would live to see where just total out and out corruption, where there's no regard for the amount of debt that we take on as a nation, as a world. And so, I always thought, hey, you charge X amount on your credit card, or you take on a mortgage or whatever, you got an obligation to pay it off. And same with a company, or same with a country. But now the debt that gets taken on is just to paper over intractable problems,
Right.
and there's no regard to whether or not it is serviceable or payable in the long run. we don't seem to care about that anymore.
Right.
So that's one. Um, the corruption of the judicial system in the United States, it's just staggering. Um, the abandonment of the constitutional principles. Constitution was not perfect. It embodied slavery. There's no justification for that, but we have to look at the 18th century mindset of man wasn't ready to abandon that, at least a certain portion. So Constitution was a compromise. It was as good as we were going to get, short of having a civil war in the 1700s. We had just fought a revolutionary war. It wasn't going to happen. There's a lot of people who are against slavery, so you can't just put down the founding fathers because they couldn't get it through their heads that slavery was not a just thing for the slaves. I mean, it wasn't right, but they weren't ready to. That took a long getting used to. There's a lot of concepts like that just isn't the time for them.
Right.
But Alexander Hamilton there was no greater advocate for freeing the slaves than him. If he couldn't get it done, then nobody could get it done. And he was one of the greatest minds of throughout history. He's up there with Aristotle and Tesla and Edison. I mean, the guy was a great mind, a great thinker. Had flaws for sure. So, the abandonment of the Constitution and the limitations that it posed on the U.S. government is certainly a recurring theme. Emergence of China, but are they going to make it? that's an emergent theme. The internationalization, globalization of the economy, automation, just what we've seen. Hey, what we've seen with the internet. Okay, so I'm old enough. I remember before there was an internet, and I've been in computers, so I remember before there was a PC. My first PC I got in 1977, I believe, and the thing was just basically we played Lemonade Stand on it. And that's like a very rudimentary computer game. And then I got a program that enabled me to print labels on it. And I thought this was the greatest thing ever.
Mm-hmm.
And now the things that we're able to do on here. So that's a theme.
Yeah.
Technology and what it's enabled you and I to do, talk on here and, get our word out there. So the democratization of technology and the ability to stick it to the mainstream media at every opportunity, the ability to minimize the mainstream media, and those are themes that we see. I mean, I've got other themes: education, the deliberate dumbing down of society. But now that's starting to reverse because you can learn anything on the internet, and everybody is being raised with it. Just instilling the desire in people to learn.
Yeah.
That's something that kind of has to come from the family, or you've got to get an urge somehow. Something has to spark your desire to learn. So, those are themes that we get a lot. I view my role not so much as a shaper or an opinion setter. I view my role probably a lot like you as kind of a messenger, just bringing the views.
Right.
And I'll put my 2 cents in there, just like you, because I want my view to be heard. But mainly my thing is I listen, I'll express an opinion, but I want to help get my guests' views out there for all of my community to hear, just like you.
Right.
That's my role.
Right. Now,
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's interview thus far. I want to direct your attention to the subscribe button. If you're enjoying it, subscribe for more great interviews to come, as well as go over to facebook.com/rethinking the dollar and give me a like there. I share monetary news on a regular basis. Looking forward to bringing you more interviews. Back to this conversation.
You hinted off a little bit at the very first point of being this unserviceable debt. And I recently, or just actually yesterday, came across a video from RT Rush Today on how we're approaching a 20 trillion, and that's kind of falling into Obama's legacy of being a $20 trillion or he's, single-handedly allowed the national debt to double. And then he's been a zero interest rate president, for his entire term. Now, why do you think that's not something that, people care about? I know in the African American community, if you dare mention that Obama has single-handedly allowed our debt to double and he's been a zero interest rate president, they may, take it, not in a way as like, something to learn from, but they'll take it as like, a stab in the back or something like that. Why do you think, the whole race card and all that plays into the fact that Obama's presidency has not been what mainstream media has painted out to be?
You know, it's like it should have nothing to do with race. I
Right.
mean, look at W. Bush there. I mean, he's number two in running up the debt.
Hmm.
And then we go to Clinton. I mean, the debt's being run up since World War II here. Last guy who really did something was Eisenhower when there was a real move to balance the budget. Clinton theoretically balanced it, but we've been stealing from Social Security. The actual amount of debt is much, much higher. You talk to Lawrence Kotlikoff. I mean, it's 120 trillion. I mean, the country's in really bad shape here. Can't afford to pay these Social Security recipients or future recipients who've been paying in their whole lives. I mean, I have. Um, so it's got nothing to do with race here. Believe
Hmm.
me, it's got to do with fiscal solvency and doing the right thing and taking a stand for further against further indebtedness. So I think the race card gets tossed in there to distract from the true situation. If it was just a simple matter of race, we could solve it real easily. Um, it's got nothing to do with race here.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, and and as much as any president really runs things, it's totally transracial here.
Yeah.
It's like if it was only about race, we would be a lot better off.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah, and I wish that was people could put that aside and just look at the facts, and the data itself speaks for itself. I mean, how well are your pockets better off now than they were say 10 years ago? And
Yeah.
I bet a lot of people would say not as strong or not as good. So let's look at why that is, and that goes back to the monetary policies and fiscal policies as you mentioned. So yeah, definitely the race card is being played something fierce, especially in the African American community, because a lot of people think it's, someone else's fault that they are, themselves not doing what they should be doing in life. So, but that's another thing though. So let's get into some of the European situation here, like the whole banking crisis and just the insolvency of the banks there. And it looks like Italy and Deutsche Bank are all leading the way towards some type of, real fiasco in the
Mm.
banking sector. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I don't see any way out. I mean, you can monetize the debt, you can do what you like, but I mean, I think they'll do whatever they have to keep these banks from bombing. But at some point, it becomes counterproductive. It used to be for every dollar of debt the government incurred, you get like $1.70 worth of economic activity.
Yeah.
At some point, uh, it starts to go negative, where when the government incurs debt, negative activity happens. And I think we're getting to that point. It's called the Minsky moment. Um, so I think they'll do whatever they have to keep those banks from going under. And my friend Andy Hoffman thinks they'll just let them fail. A lot of people think they're not going to bail them out. I don't believe that for 2 seconds. I think they'll do whatever it takes. They're spending $180 billion a month right now, the European Central Bank, to keep these banks afloat. So are they going to let Deutsche become the next Lehman? I don't think so. I think they'll do anything. Bail-ins, I think you have a bail-in. Uh, they tried it in Cyprus. They've tried it in Greece. You try it on a mass scale, you're going to have a freaking rebellion. You're going to have blood in the streets. It's easier to just print the money in the final analysis. That's what they will do. Yeah, a little country like Cyprus, nobody cares. Greece, the people are so subjugated uh, and so ground into the dirt. But try it in the United States. I mean, you're going to have a revolution. You can't just go against the FDIC's guarantee, which the FDIC doesn't have the money, you know it, but the Federal Reserve will print, the ECB will print, and everybody's going to print, including the Chinese and the Russians. You know,
Yeah.
we're never going to have another gold standard. I don't believe that. We might have a Bitcoin standard. We aren't having a gold standard. Powers that be will not allow it. It's
Right.
just not going to happen.
Right.
It might be the best thing.
Yeah, it restricts them from doing what they want to do, which is expand credit, to be able to have something for the
Mm,
small people to use in exchange for their time and labor. So that definitely wouldn't happen.
yeah.
Now you mentioned that print. So that goes into the whole idea of rethinking the dollar. If they're going to begin printing dollars or monetizing, debt and coming up with all types of tools, do you think? Another question is, do you think the whole negative rates? I had a comment on one of my videos mentioned. A guy mentioned that the Fed can never go negative as far as the interest rates. What are your thoughts about that? You think they can actually go negative and then launch out all types of stimulus of some kind to pump this thing up to it pops?
I think they'll do helicopter money before they go negative.
Mm-hmm.
Negative is just so deflationary. That's going to cause banks to blow up.
Mm-hmm.
You got to have a constantly expanding monetary supply for these banks to continue on.
Mm-hmm.
It's all predicated on banks printing money,
Right.
and when you have a negative interest rate, then you have a contraction in the money supply, right? I mean, I don't see it as a long-term solution. I don't believe the U.S. will go negative. It might only be that the 10-year is 50 basis points, but it's not going negative.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't think so. I don't think that's a solution. I think that's a huge mistake, and it causes people to start losing faith in the banks and start taking their money out in the form of cash. And then you get to the war on cash, which I was one of the first people to write about, although I didn't call it the war on cash. I called it Operation Dirty Money.
Operation Dirty Money.
It's a very unsuccessful program. It won't work. And you can't have Las Vegas if you don't have cash. I mean, people want cash. It's that simple.
Right. So do you foresee, like as you mentioned, that Bitcoin could probably be one of those, forms of legal tender? Do you think that a cashless society is certain or is in the cards, or what
No,
are your thoughts?
no, people don't want. Maybe you can talk the Swedes and the Norwegians and the Finns into it, the Danes. You can't get Americans to do it. I mean, to a point, yeah. Right now, is it 93% of all transactions in the U.S. take place without cash.
Mm-hmm.
But and maybe the younger people, maybe the millennials are willing to have no cash in their pocket. But like, and I've written extensively about the war on cash, but being in Vegas recently, I realized, hey, the war on cash is not happening here. People will gamble on credit. I mean, yeah, you take out a marker for $100,000 if you're a whale, whatever. But Vegas is a cash economy, and expansion of gambling, gaming around the country. It's an uphill battle. Bitcoin is here to stay, cryptocurrencies, and as the trust in government sanctioned currencies erodes, the confidence in Bitcoin goes up. And it's no coincidence that Bitcoin hit its low about a year ago of $187. It recently broke 800. The government monkeys with it a little bit as they get Bitcoin and they flood the market with it. But in China, that's what's been driving it. And those people don't trust their government when it comes to money. China invented paper currency, and they, not coincidentally, invented inflation. Okay, the two go hand in hand. So the Chinese have been big proponents of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. That's where it's going to continue. There's no question in my mind that I've had my doubts about Bitcoin, but cryptocurrency is where it's heading, and something with gold. But look, we're in an irrational period of time here. Everything that's happening in the economy, in the monetary system, the economic system, it's starting to get detached from rationality. And to think that you can come up with a rational conclusion to an irrational period, it doesn't work that way. It will be an irrational blowout that occurs, and a new system will morph out from that. So to think that you can come up with a rational solution to it all, not going to happen.
All right.
That's the key.
Well, as we draw down towards the end of our conversation, I would like to just, get your thoughts. It's from a radio show host. What are some of the ways you encourage your audience to, I guess, take action, get informed, and prepare and preserve and protect themselves for the days ahead?
Well, precious metals. You got to get your survival tools, whatever they might be. Without getting too specific, you know, you need to be prepared. There could be disruptions. Who the heck knows? I mean, civil unrest, we've seen our share of it this summer. Knock on wood, not too much as of late, but civil unrest is a real possibility. The supermarkets only have about a week's worth of inventory. Imagine if the trucks can't get out, if there's a global economic collapse, if the internet goes down for 4 days, where are you going to be then? The infrastructure and the internet
Right.
appears to be pretty robust, but if the internet stops working in part of the world, in China, I mean, all these things, they're complex networks. The rule of complex systems means they could be brought down very quickly by simple things, by very minor problems. So you need to be prepared. I'm not being a fearmonger. I'm not telling you it's going to happen. I'm just telling you what could happen. And, you know, why not have a plan in place so if something happens, you're prepared for it, rather than just waiting for something to happen, waiting for a black swan. All of this stuff is nothing new. It's all happened throughout history. Uh, Governments come and go. Governments have fallen. Even the most apparently stable governments have fallen. Just because the U.S. government, it's 200 plus years of stability, doesn't mean we're going to have 200 plus more years of stability. Hopefully we do. But the current system is unsustainable. The debt can't be paid and won't be paid. It'll be repudiated in one means or another. So why be a sitting duck? Uh, some amount of gold, whatever you're comfortable with, secured in a safe place, makes a lot of sense. Not saying put all your money in it. I don't think that makes sense at all. You never know what's going to happen, and that's the point. The future's always uncertain, and taking some steps to protect yourself just seems to me to make a lot of sense.
Well, Kerry Lutz, I appreciate you sitting down with us and sharing your take on the global economy as well as the dollar. Give the audience, for those that may not be aware of your work, a place to follow you and how to stay in tune with what you
Sure.
have going on.
Glad to. It's financialsurvivalnetwork.com. It's financialsurvivalnetwork.com, and you can send me an email if you like, kl@kerrylutz.com. That's KL@KERRYLUTZ.com. And hey, thanks so much, Mike, for having me on your show. It's a real pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, this concludes my conversation with Kerry Lutz, host of the Financial Survival Network. Hope you found our conversation to be informative as well as educational. I want to encourage you, click the subscribe button for more RTD interviews, as well as scroll over to rethinkingthedollar.com and visit the store there. Have a lot of free educational books there for you, as well as some monetary awareness t-shirts for you. Hope all is well. Looking forward to bringing you more interviews in the future. Until we meet again.